When you think about the first 2 years of the Biden presidency, especially from the perspective of national security, you got to think of the disastrous Afghanistan pullout resulting in the deaths of 13 service members. You got to think about the porous border situation where God knows how many hundreds of thousands are pouring across our border with ill intent that we don't even know about. And of course, thirdly, the latest atrocity was the Chinese spy balloon that just floated across our country without the military doing anything about it, without the president doing anything about it. So how shocking was it that in last night's State of the Union address, none of those things were mentioned? Oh, other than some lip service to comprehensive immigration reform, which has nothing to do with protecting the border. Why is that? How bad are things? Well, let's talk to the guy who was the acting Secretary of Defense under the last president, President Trump. He's Chris Miller. Brand new book out this week, Soldier Secretary, Warnings from the Battlefield and the Pentagon about America's most dangerous enemies. Chris Miller, thank you for joining us tonight.
Larry, thanks for having me. I go with the best, and it's good to talk to you again. We talked in the morning a while ago, so thanks for having me back on and kind of doing the hot takes of what happened last night.
Yeah, you get the twofer. You get the morning radio show and now the primetime TV show, Chris.
Larry, I'm new at this punditry game, so go gently on me, but I'm trying to learn from the best. So thanks for having me.
Listen, we have what we call a target-rich environment here, Mr. As you know, as a former soldier. So I got to ask you, I mean, he's 0 for 2 now. This is his second State of the Union, and he has failed to honor the 13 fallen members of the military who died because of his hapless mishandling of the Afghan pullout. I would have loved to have seen those families up in the balcony, but not so. I mean, this really is unforgivable, I think.
Still awfully raw for me, Larry. Thanks for highlighting it. There are a lot of us veterans and also just civilians that helped with the evacuation because the government, the members of the armed forces that did their jobs in Afghanistan during that period were magnificent, but government left a lot of people behind, and it's still pretty raw. I would have loved to have seen some sort of recognition, nothing. And I also kind of, Larry, to be honest, I saw those generals and the admirals all sitting there and the Air Force people, and I thought, what are they thinking right now? You know how they have to sit there and they can't, show any emotion, but I couldn't help but wonder because they get input to that speech, and somebody couldn't have put in a little shout out about all the great work that American civilians and veterans have done to try to get more Afghan refugees and people that helped us out of the country.
Yeah, no, and they couldn't mention it, of course, because it would highlight a failure of this president, a huge failure. But when you look on the national security scorecard here, it begins with Afghanistan, certainly. But can we talk about the Chinese spy balloon? I mean, this was an embarrassment and basically a provocative act from China that told the world that we look pretty weak on the national stage, international stage.
Could you just, visually your viewers probably just saw me sigh because it's comical in a weird sort of way just because, of all the crazy memes and everything. But as a national security professional, but more importantly, as an American, I'm waiting for the answers. I'm still confused. Every 15 minutes, I get a new explanation on my Twitter feed or someplace else about what happened. And that's kind of the point, I bring out my book is about accountability. And again, I saw them sitting there, the generals and the admirals, and I was like, hey, is anybody going to accept responsibility for our sovereign territory, our airspace being invaded by Chinese spy balloon?
Well,
I haven't seen it yet.
Listen, we have the benefit of you being here tonight to talk about this. You were the former acting Secretary of Defense under President Trump. And they claim that, this happened 3 times during the Trump administration. You were in that chair. You got those briefings. Did you know about this? Did you hear about this? Did the military withhold it from you? Or are they just making things up now after the fact to cover their butts politically?
So I'm not a political insider, DC kind of person, so I don't know how to be politically correct. So let me just be as direct as I can. Never was I aware, had been briefed, aware, heard scuttlebutt, et cetera, about Chinese incursions with spy balloons or any other way into our airspace. So it's almost Orwellian, it's beyond double speak. It's triple speak right now. I don't know what's going on. I like to learn more. And if I have the opportunity, I will learn more, but we still don't kind of know what happened, do we?
I got to ask you, let's say this did happen and you were aware of it as acting Secretary of Defense and you need to confer with President Trump about this balloon. What would your recommendation be to President Trump as this thing was floating over an Air Force base with ICBM silos in Montana?
I know I'm supposed to say, well, it depends. I tell you, though, what I would have recommended unhesitatingly is that we had to bring that balloon down. Here's my ish, Larry, is you know what? We spend about $1 trillion a year on our national security, and we couldn't have controlled the descent, or we could have brought that down in some other way. And I'm not a great map reader, but that thing crossed over the Aleutian Islands and was out over the water a long time. Did we not know that it had incurred into our airspace, or what was going on? I don't know. But yeah, I can say definitively I would have recommended to the president to bring that thing down.
Absolute act of provocation from a country that doesn't seem to fear us right now on the international stage, seems to be sort of putting their toe in the water to see how we'll react to things like this. It sort of raises the specter of Taiwan, especially considering we keep saying that our response in Ukraine is directly related to China acting on Taiwan. Well, what message does Chairman Xi have from the United States right now under President Biden?
Larry, you started the conversation about Afghanistan and the debacle. And I think if we open up, or when they open up the Chinese Communist Party archives in 50 years and they look at the National Security Council notes, they will go, it'll be quite clear that our failure in Afghanistan, the debacle there, gave hope to Chairman Xi, and what we're seeing right now, the provocations in Taiwan and the provocation in the United States are directly related. They saw weakness and they're probing us right now. That's exactly what they're doing.
Your book, Soldier Secretary, Warnings from the Battlefield and the Pentagon About America's Most Dangerous Enemies. Our current Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, he'll probably call himself a soldier secretary too, but I think there's a difference. I'm told by people in the military that if you're at the Pentagon long enough, if you've got enough stars on your shoulder for too many years, it's not quite the same. Do you think that he gets it in the same way that you get it?
Oh, geez. I've worked for him in the past. I've seen how he's worked. You never want to disparage anybody, but by the same token, that's really the theme of my book, right, Larry, is accountability. We lost a war and no one's been held accountable. And let's be clear, General Austin was the commander of the Central Command that oversaw the war in Afghanistan and Iraq. And what did we do? We're just going to do more of the same. So that's kind of one of the points in my book is we need to hold our generals accountable for these mistakes they made.
That sends a message not just to the American people, the voters, the stakeholders here, but also it sends a message down the chain of command, doesn't it? When people below you would get fired for incompetence, then the people above you should also get fired for incompetence. Accountability is a major problem. Well, let's pull on this thread a little bit, Acting Secretary Miller, because the Biden administration and people in the Pentagon will say, well, listen, this all started because Trump and his team committed us with the Taliban to pull out prematurely, and we were just trying to make the best of a bad situation. Are they wrong in that assessment? Would it have been different had Trump won a second term and then you and he would have been overseeing this pullout?
Yes, Larry, thank you for bringing that up. And it's kind of a nuanced point, but the whole plan was to not just pick up and run. We were going to maintain a counterterrorism force there and also a small advisory force that could help the Afghans continue. Remember, we took the country down. I was part of that effort. 200 special operators and intelligence officers defeated the Taliban and rid al-Qaeda from Afghanistan. The idea was we could probably keep the country together to allow the Afghan government to come to some sort of agreement with the Taliban. That was the idea. That's what we were going to do. So this whole narrative that we set them up, we set the Biden administration up for failure is reprehensible in my mind.
Well, it is reprehensible, especially when they'll never say you set them up for failure because they still think this was a success. But their talking heads on cable news try to make this point. But the truth is out there. Chris Miller knows the truth. He was there, and he tells the truth in his book, Soldier Secretary, Warnings from the Battlefield and the Pentagon About America's Most Dangerous Enemies. Great job, Chris Miller. Don't be a stranger. We'll have you back. More to come. You're listening. No, you're watching O'Connor Tonight. It's the Salem News Channel.